Okay, number one, journal format. This is one of the most common issues that your papers get rejected. You may say, oh, I have an excellent idea. I have spent 3 years of my life on doing this study, and you are just rejecting for the format? It's just for formatting issues you're rejecting a paper? The answer is yes. Because we have limited resources, right? We receive a few hundred papers every year, and in some cases a few thousands. It depends on the journal. And we have limited number of associate editors, limited number of reviewers, and this is a voluntary job, so we cannot send all papers for review. So we need to decide which papers should be sent to the reviewers, and by rejecting this rejection, we save our reviewers' times as well. And who are the reviewers? It's you, me. Yeah? So we are saving our time by rejecting at the first stage. So now, why formatting is important? Because just the assumption is, if someone doesn't know how to, the formatting of the standard formatting of academic scientific papers, most probably the person doesn't know how to do research. I understand that this is debatable, but anyway, as I said, suppose that every week I have to, so let's say, check 100 papers. So I cannot read all 100 papers every week, right? So I need to make the decision, and 80%, 50 to 80% should be rejected. So one of the reasons is formatting issues. So for example, some journals, they expect you have a discussion section. Some journals don't expect. For example, econometrics, those papers in the field of economics, they usually don't have a discussion, right? So, but some journals, like our journal, we expect to see a discussion section after the results. Or some of the journals, for example, they have some specific formats. Some of them, they allow you to follow any format that you want as long as it's consistent. Anyway, you need to read the author's guideline, journal's author guidelines, and then follow the guideline carefully. My advice to you is download a few papers recently published in the journal you want to consider, and then follow the format and prepare your format your paper following those papers and journal's author guidelines. Another one is for example, referencing styles. I see that, I understand that different, styles like APA, Harvard, and Chicago, many others, they have different, styles. But if the journal is giving you freedom to choose any of them, you need to be consistent. For example, if you want to use APA, it should be APA, right? And you should be very careful in referencing, in applying the referencing style, right? So sometimes when I see very weird referencing style, I assume that, okay, this person has not even read perhaps enough number of papers because it's not familiar with any of the referencing styles, right? So I would reject the paper when I see these type of formatting issues. My suggestion is use EndNote or Mendeley, these referencing management software packages. Or for example, recently I see that when some authors, they submit their papers, they include their names in the manuscript. We cannot send this paper for review because it's supposed to be blindly review. It means the reviewers are not supposed to know who has written the paper. There are different types of reviews, but for my journal, most of the journals, we expect, the requirement actually is the author should not include their names in any part of the manuscript, right? So I have to reject immediately or maybe unsubmit the paper. I will give you more examples of author's guideline, or sometimes one section is missing, or so what I suggest is follow the author's guideline carefully and download a few papers from the journal you want to target and follow their format. So I want to give you another example, tables and figures. For example, sometimes they are not clear and you cannot read them. Tables should be editable. most of the journals require using editable tables. So you cannot take a picture and put it in the text for tables, right? Or figures, the resolution, the quality is very low. So follow again the author's guideline that you can find on journal's website. And another example, here you can see two tables with almost the same information. Both of them reports the correlation results between some variables that used in the study. So which table you prefer? The first one is actually the SPSS results of performing correlation analysis, and the author actually copied it into the body of the manuscript. So it's exactly the SPSS output, but here the author has prepared the table. First of all, some of the information here are repetitive, so you can see this 171 is here as well. So whatever we have here at the top, we have here at the bottom as well, but this is not the only issue. You need to summarize the information, and we do not want to have too many tables. So when you can put as much as information you can in a table. For example, here you can see this is correlation results, and I use some asterisks to show whether the results are significant or not. So I removed here the author in the second paper, the second table, removed these p-values and reported them as using these symbols. So it shows that, for example, and the three of these asterisks, this means the p-value is less than 0.001. Or you can see here we have the mean standard deviation of the variables for both male and female. It depends on the objectives of the results. So what I'm saying is you need to prepare the tables following the format of the journals. Another thing, in most journals, at least in my journals, if you check the tables in the published papers, there is no vertical line, right? So as you can see, there are just one here at the top, one at the bottom, and one just to separate the headings of the columns, variables or columns, columns, and with this part. So remove all these vertical lines. And caption, you need a caption. You need to explain how you measure, for example, how you measure gender, because you can give 0 or 1 to male or female, or the opposite. Female can be 0 and male can be 1. Then the interpretation for the results will be different. So, and another one, what is the meaning of these symbols? So I need to explain here. And the title of the paper, title of the table. So I have explained here the results of correlation analysis. So anyway, what I'm saying is, just carefully follow the journal guideline and recently published papers in the journals you want to submit to. Now I want to share with you a secret. Manuscript management systems that those large publishers are using, like Emerald, or let's say Sainsbury, Elsevier, Springer, they use AI, artificial intelligence systems, to detect high-risk papers. So when I log into the portal as the editor-in-chief, some papers I see have been labeled as medium or high. I have copy-pasted this from Emerald portal, Manuscript Central portal. So I see for some papers is yellow, it has been highlighted with yellow and medium, and some red. Why? Sometimes there is plagiarism. There are some parts copy-pasted from other papers. So there is a case of plagiarism. So we need to carefully check the paper, and in most cases we reject the paper. Or self-plagiarism. You cannot copy-paste what you already published, put it in the new paper. So you need to paraphrase it or direct quotation. So self-plagiarism also is not accepted. But it can be more than that. You may be already familiar with plagiarism, but there are other things as well. For example, the system will detect when the authors have submitted several papers in a day. So when you submit 10 papers in a day, the system will tell editor-in-chief, check carefully, maybe there is something wrong. And I tell you, in most cases, there is something wrong. I don't think any researcher can submit 10 papers in a day, right? or when the paper is under review at another journal, we are not allowed to submit the same paper to several journals, right? So this is an ethical thing, and you need to withdraw. When you want to submit to another journal, you need to withdraw your paper from the current journal, right? This is really interesting, submitting, this is exactly copy-pasted from the Manuscript Central. Submitting computer has been linked to multiple submissions. This happens when, so for example, 38 submissions from the same computer outside. So the same laptop has been used to submit 38 papers to different journals, 2 to the same journal maybe, and 36 to other journals. I'm not saying we reject for these reasons, but just label them and ask the editor-in-chief to have a look. And I tell you, in most cases, I see there is something wrong. I don't know why the same laptop may submit, let's say, 40, 38, 30 plus papers in short period. But again, based on my personal experience, always when I check, I see there is something wrong. So anyway, just follow the ethical guidelines and make sure there is no plagiarism, self-plagiarism. You won't submit your paper to several journals. This happened to me. I was the reviewer for another journal, and then I received the paper that I received as editor-in-chief in my own journal. The paper was submitted to 2 journals at the same time. So be careful about it. And now, read journal's aims and scope. Make sure the paper that you have written is in the scope of the journal. And there are some requirements. Again, you need to, this is in line with the author's guidelines. Some journals, for example, they clearly have stated that they do not accept any review papers. So when you prepare a systematic review, you should not consider that journal. Or some journals, I know there are some journals, they don't accept, let's say, partial least squares structure equation modeling or PLS method. So if you use PLS, you should not submit to that journal. So read the author's guideline again and aims and scope of the journal. And I have a suggestion. Check papers recently published in that journal. For example, papers published in the past 2 years. See whether you find similar in terms of in the same field or area. If you find, for example, if your paper is on financial literacy and the journal already has published a few, this means, okay, so they may accept financial literacy papers, right? And how to check the latest papers? So you go to advanced search, and here in the journal name, write your, let's say, tourism management perspectives. And let's say I want to see whether there is any paper on corporate governance. Search. Yes, there are 30 papers, and here you can limit, your search to, let's say, the past 2 years, 3 years. And here, yes, still they are accept. It seems they publish papers on corporate governance, right? Okay. So this is one of the methods you can use, or you can search the journal's website. So it depends on the journal you want to use. You can use the journal website. How to find a journal to submit to? Suppose that the journal that you want to target, after doing some investigation, you decide that, okay, maybe it's not a good choice. Maybe my paper should be submitted to another journal. Then you can do the same. You can check other journals using the method that I shared with you, or you can use journal finders. So for example, just write in Google, let's say Elsevier journal finder, or any publisher that you want journal find. And here you can fill out the form, and the website will suggest a few journals to you to consider, and then you can do the same, checking the aims and scopes and latest published papers to see whether your paper has a chance to be published there. Another method is check those papers that you have cited. So for example, if you have several papers from Journal of Asia Pacific, Journal of Business Administration, so maybe it's good to consider this journal for your paper as well. So you can check the reference list of your own paper to choose the next journal to submit to. Another issue, language, writing, and spelling issues. Yeah, it's debatable. I know that English is not the first language of many of us, including myself. But at the end, if you are submitting to an English journal, so you need to check, you need to proofread your work. So you need to make sure that the English writing is good. One of the reasons that we reject papers is English writing. You may say, oh, yeah, and this is not fair, or blah, blah, blah. But at the end, you know, sometimes, I mean, with the papers we receive, I even cannot understand. So when I cannot understand, how can we review these papers? I'm not talking about very small mistakes, but sometimes it's really very difficult. It's impossible sometimes to read the paper. So my suggestion is use paid services. Of course, for many projects, they are not funded, so we cannot pay, we cannot afford. You may ask others to help you check your paper before you submit. It's good. Usually I send my papers to my friends. They just have a quick look. Sometimes they find some mistakes, they correct it. Or you can use English checking software packages. I have provided some examples here, like Ginger and so on. Some of them have free versions as well. Yeah, they are limited, the features are limited, but still are good. And what I do is I use Google Doc and Microsoft Word. So when you copy paste your manuscript into Google Doc or Microsoft Word, they find spelling mistakes, and they identify some of the grammatical issues, and they suggest some changes. Sometimes we don't see, when we are writing, we don't see the mistakes, especially the spelling mistakes, right? So we need someone to help us or use a software package. I can prove this. For example, here, you see, it's wrong. This language, the spelling is wrong. So I correct it, and many of us didn't notice, right? This is the issue. Sometimes we make mistakes and we don't see it, and we submit and we get rejection. I'm not saying I reject paper just for, you know, these very small mistakes, but I'm not sure about other journals. They may reject it, especially when in the beginning. Yesterday I received a paper I was reading. In the abstract, in the first sentence, there were 2 big mistakes, spelling and grammatical errors. And then, okay, when I saw this, then I checked different parts, and I saw, oh my God, there are so many everywhere. In every sentence there are some mistakes. And then I found that it's not easy to read the paper, so I rejected the paper.